Once again, it's that time of year where the days are getting a little bit shorter, the nights are getting a little bit longer, and there's just a touch of crispness to the air. And that also means it's time for the Lume to get a little bit brighter. Welcome to Lume-O-Ween 2024. Now, regular viewers already kind of know what they're in for with this one, but for all of you relative time newbies, this is my annual video where I take a look back at the best Lume over the last year. And this is going to be the top 5, both in terms of longevity, pure intensity, as well as creativity. And I think this is like the 5th or 6th year in a row I've done this. So for me, Lume-O-Ween is an annual tradition. And the only real rule with this whole top 5 list is that it has to be something I've actually reviewed since last year's Lume-O-Ween. Now, I got to admit that this year's list isn't quite as exciting as the previous years. Because this year, I really didn't see any completely crazy designs, like the Revlot R10 Admiral, or the Ikigai Maru. And there were also no blazingly bright full Lume surprises. Like last year we had the Wise Hitman, and the year before that, the Signum Kutas came out. And if you're curious what I'm wearing, this is the Wise Hitman, so consider that your wrist check. But even with all of that, we still had some pretty good contenders over this last year. And one of the really positive changes I noticed that there were a number of premium watches with really good Lume this year. And that would be the Manta Ocean King version 3, the Zodiac Ceramic Super Seawolf, and of course we can't forget the Christopher Ward Pro 300. And this is really nice to see, because in the past when I've seen some more of those premium divers, ones that are getting closer and even over that $1,000 mark, a lot of them just seem to lose focus on the Lume. They're so concerned with being a really nice diver that they kind of forget about it and it's just sort of an afterthought thrown in there. And I'm looking directly at you, Seiko. But these are 3 really great examples from 3 good brands that kept their eye on the ball the entire time and created just really good, complete, balanced, fantastic divers all around. So even though this is really a top 5 list, you can kind of consider those 3 as a tie for 6th place. But that said, let's get Lume-O-Ween 2024 rolling. And coming in at number 5, we have the Zelos Thresher GMT. Which, if you don't remember, was a killer titanium True or Traveler's GMT from Zelos. And one that surprisingly didn't immediately sell out. In fact, I think there's a number of them still available. And maybe this was because the price was a tad high, or perhaps the 9075 GMTs have gotten really saturated. Or maybe it's just a sign of the times. But regardless, I think this is one of their best. And especially the Mother of Pearl version I got to see. That, I think, is a true sleeper hit for the brand. And maybe it was because when you look at it at the website, it just looks a little too special, shall we say. But in reality, it's a bit more toned down. There are some times that gets really vibrant, but a lot of times it's just really cool and exotic looking. And the unique feature here is that the bezel insert is also mother of pearl, giving it just a killer cohesive look. So that's the watch, but the main reason we're here is because of the Lume. And this is the first Zelos to have a Lumicast type dial, where the indices are these 3D printed blocks of Lume, rather than the traditional filled metal indices. Now, there are a lot of promises when it comes to Lumicast, and the big one is that it's supposed to be longer, brighter, longer lasting Lume. And unfortunately, this is a promise I've yet to see kept, not just with the Zelos, but with a few other watches as well. Because here, even though this does have really good Lume, it doesn't quite have great or the crazy good Lume I've seen from the brand in the past. Ones that are using the more traditional setup. However, the other killer feature of a Lumicast dial is this. It's 3D Lume glowing from all sides. And this just adds a whole other dimension of cool and depth when you're looking at it at night. Pun intended. And if you've never seen one of these in person, it's fantastic. And when you take that and you pair it with a great watch, it's even better. Now, coming in at number 4, we have the Signum Siege, a watch many of you have probably never heard of. Because honestly, the review I made didn't do that well. But it's one you really should have watched. Now, it is a little bit odd, there's no getting around that, as this is Signum's take on a field watch. And it kind of has this juxtaposition in styles, where you pair a simple case with what is a very exotic and easily one of my favorite dials. One that's made with this natural blue copper turquoise stone. Now, there are some fully loomed versions out there as well, and I'm guessing they're going to be as bright as Signum's fully loomed CUDAs. But this one, with the blue copper turquoise, I love it. I've never seen anything like it. With all the different colors and textures it contains, it just draws you in. But more importantly, at least for Lume-O-Ween, it's got Lume with a capital L. It's not quite King of Lume good, but it is close. And I love just how this thing looks with its lit up chapter ring, coming off as what I think is a good halfway point between a fully loomed watch and something more traditional. Because let's be honest here, fully loomed watches, as cool as they are a bit gimmicky, as a lot of times the hands can get lost in all that bright light. So here, you kind of get a similar feel, similar effect to that craziness that goes along with a full lume dial, but paired with something that's still easy to read. And I think this one should get some bonus points just for looking equally as cool during the day as it does the night. Now, next up, at number 3, is the Vaer G5 GMT. And the one I looked at was this all stealthed out tactical version. Now, side note here, I know a lot of you don't really pay attention to the thumbnails I put up, other than just a quick glance. But the one I made for this is easily my favorite for the year. It took me a little bit of time because I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, but ultimately I wound up using this AI app to put my face on John Wick. I mean, it is tactical, right? So I think it's cool, but a lot of you probably never noticed that. Anyway, this is an all USA assembled Miyota 9075 based true GMT from Vaer. And I should mention that there's also a similar Swiss version that uses a Sellita SW330, a traveler's movement, if that's really what you'd prefer. But regardless of what movement, it's a pretty sharp looking watch that continues to follow Vaer's design language. One of being familiar, yet not too familiar. And I'm always a sucker for the twisted lugs they put on their designs. Now, there are some regular versions of the G5 GMT out there, including a pretty good looking Batman. But I specifically requested this tactical, all blacked out DLC coded version, just because I think it's the only blacked out 9075 GMT I've seen, and I thought it'd make an interesting video. Now, as cool as the tactical version is, this one did have a few notable issues, mainly the thickness of the watch and the glare from the crystal. But one thing it definitely did right was its lume, with a reported 25 layers of X1 grade C3 superluminova. It's nice, it's bright, and should easily last you through the night. Now, just like the Signum Siege above, it's not quite King of Lume worthy, but again, it's pretty close. And for a while, it was the best GMT I'd seen for lume, only to be replaced by something we're going to talk about in a minute. Coming in at number 2 is a watch that some of you will be surprised to see here, as I was a little bit late to the party in terms of reviewing this, and this of course is the Erebus Origin from Mr. Hello himself. Now, Erebus as a brand has moved on a little bit from this original 41mm Origin, onto a smaller version, to the very well received Ascent, and now a GMT version of the Origin. But the original Origin, which sounds a bit redundant when I say it, but the original Origin was their first watch. And for the most part, it's a pretty standard, very affordable diver. I think at the time I called it the in and out double-double of the watch world, as it's not exactly the best diver out there. I mean, I can think of plenty of better divers, as well as plenty of divers that have a more original design. But for the price, it's a great, solid, reliable package. And that's really what the whole affordable watch world is about. And I can appreciate that Jody, Mr. Lume Wars, when it came to lume, at least for the hands here, didn't skimp out. He knew what he was doing. Now, the dial does fade out a little bit sooner than I would like, but the hands here are King of Lume hands. Some of the best I've seen, and able to keep up with the hands on a Wise Hitman, as well as the Great Wall, the original King of Lume. And when you see that, and consider how cheap this watch is at $300, that's pretty impressive and noteworthy. And reason it's number 2 on this list. Now, before we get to the top Lume watch of 2024, as usual, I do have a few honorable mentions I want to talk about. And the first of which is the 36.5mm Citizen EcoDrive ProMaster. When it comes to Japanese watches, people often overlook Citizen for Seiko, but they really shouldn't, and this tiny little quartz diver is proof of that. Because as small as it is, as small as the dial is, as small as the indices and the hands are, it easily outpaces a larger Seiko diver. So you can say this one's small but mighty. Next, we have the Islander Melville GMT, with one of the coolest Lume designs I saw last year. Something that's like straight out of Tron. And it wound up being a very interesting choice for Mark and the folks over at Islander, just for outlining everything with Lume rather than the more traditional method of doing a frame and then just filling it up. Now, unfortunately, performance here is just piss poor, which in some ways you could expect because there's not a lot of surface area for the Lume, which in some ways is disappointing, but it's still cool while it lasts. And the last honorable mention here is the Ikigai Kame. Ikigai's latest watch, which I did review and should be released some point next year. There's a whole longer story with that. But this really represents what I love about Ikigai as a brand. That for them, Lume has never really been an afterthought, but it's a key integral part of their designs from the beginning. And with the Kame, which I believe is supposed to be inspired by sea turtles, it follows that as well, with great Lume and a good-looking original design. That said, for 2024, the #1 spot for Lume-O-Ween goes to Wise Timepieces out of Thailand. Like, the entire brand, not just one specific watch. And that's because everything I've seen from this year has been fantastic for Lume. Which, admittedly, does kind of break my rules. But if you really want to get specific, it would actually go to the Bronze 88 diver I reviewed. A true king of Lume, able to beat almost anything else out there, and everything else on this list. But honestly, with that one, it's really just a bronze version of the regular 88, a watch I previously reviewed, and I'm pretty sure won Lume-O-Ween a year or 2 years ago. So while it's great, it may not necessarily be that interesting to talk about here. However, the thing is, they also released their 80X True GMT this year, with a pretty original, interesting design, and for Lume, it's almost as good as that diver. The only thing really holding it back was that they decided to use a different kind of Lume on the hour hand, and it wound up fading away just a little bit sooner than the rest. But as it is, it's easily the best GMT I've ever seen for Lume, and probably will be for a while. So that's the watch that beat out the Vaer we just talked about. And then, on top of that, the frosting on the cake, so to speak, is that they also put out their 15th anniversary gold dial dress watch. And one thing that surprises me is that I don't think the video did that well, but I keep getting asked about it, online as well as in person. And I think it's because of its intricate, interesting dial and shiny 904L case. There's nothing else out there like it. But beyond that, it's got crazy good Lume for a dress watch. Now, I can hear some of you saying a dress watch really shouldn't have Lume, and maybe not, but regardless, it's got it anyways. And in true Wise fashion, they didn't skimp out on it. So with 3 great releases, and 2 of which would be really vying for that top spot anyways, I'm just going to say that Wise wins the whole thing. Showing that not only do they know how to do Lume, but right now they're the microbrand to beat. And with that, Lume-O-Ween 2024 is done. Now, as usual, let me know your thoughts on this down below, on the watches, as well as what are the best watches you saw this year for Lume. And especially mention something if you think you have a watch that could give one of these a run for their money. And as always, you guys know what to do down below. Like, comment, subscribe, help out the channel, all that good stuff. But I'm Shane, this is Relative Time, and I'll see you next time.